for joining us for Pride in Business Going Digital. I have James Demers here, the Executive Director for the Calgary Queer Arts Society. And this morning we're going to be talking a little bit about the Fairy Tales Film Festival and how that is going to be executed during this unprecedented time. So James, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So to start off with, for anyone who hasn't had the chance to attend Fairy Tales in previous years, can you give us a little bit of an idea about what the festival is all about?
So Fairy Tales is a lot like the weather in Calgary. There's something different all the time, which works out for most people. So Fairy Tales has been around for 22 years. The focus of the festival is to promote the LGBT narrative, so narratives of LGBT people in film and in film mediums, but it's also to humanize those stories by watching them collectively as an audience. And that can happen in a couple of different formats, but representation is really important. And these are also fantastic movies.
Excellent. And like you've already alluded to, part of the festival is enjoying it as a whole or as a community. So obviously we're not allowed to be creating gatherings of more than 15 people at the moment. So how have you pivoted Fairy Tales from a larger in-person event into something manageable and feasible within this time?
No, it's a good question. So we partnered with a platform called Zerb TV. What we wanted to do was recreate the festival in the most authentic in-person experience that could be translated online. And so for us, that meant things like hey-gating it and having people show up at the same time to watch the movie, and still delivering things like before each of the films, we're going to have short videos with local artist content, because we would normally have special guests involved in the festival and external events. And so what we've done is we've videotaped those. So when you sit down in the theater, you'll get trailers and local artist content, and it will feel like sitting down with Fairy Tales. And we wanted to do that in a platform that was accessible. And the opportunity here is also that for some of our films, we can screen them globally. We can have conversations about sort of like international queer identity with an international audience. And so there was no reason not to try and make it work. And the other part of it is that our community really values the touchstones over the year where they get to connect with each other. And with the world being in a complicated and strange place, we know that as a festival for LGBT people, we often provide an opportunity for them to connect. And so we wanted to maintain our dates so that we could still provide that experience to the community, even if the rest of the world was strange. So we felt like we had an emotional obligation to the representation that we provide for people, but also we're a film festival. And so it seems reasonable that we would be able to pivot and offer this in a way that was productive for our audience.
So you mentioned that there would normally be guests and special speakers at the films. Will there be any opportunities for panel discussions, or will you have any additional guests that may be joining for some of the films?
Yeah, lots actually. The interesting thing about going digital is bringing in someone for an interview is much easier. And so we actually have about 60% of our films will feature interviews with the filmmakers or a panel of filmmakers after the film, calling in from wherever they happen to be. We're going to be live broadcasting those. And so you'll watch the film with us and then pop over to our Facebook page, and the live broadcast will go 15 minutes after the film ends. So you can, go to the bathroom and grab some popcorn and come back is the idea. But we actually have quite a bit of integration. Right now, we're just figuring out how to convince people to get up at 4 a.m. to call in from Berlin or from Sri Lanka. And that's working out really well. But because so many film festivals have canceled completely, filmmakers are really enthusiastic to get in front of an audience and talk about their work. So we're taking advantage of that.
Obviously, it takes time to choose the films for a festival that goes on for as long as Fairy Tales does. So you've been picking the films well in advance of probably knowing about COVID or having to pivot to digital. So how would you say that the pandemic has affected the offerings that are going to be shown at Fairy Tales?
So it's interesting, the pandemic has had an effect because of the way that the film festival system works across the globe. So large film festivals like TIFF and like BFI Flair, which is the largest queer film festival in the world next to the Berlinale, a lot of them move their dates into the fall, which would normally not be a problem. We all operate on a cycle, except that those large film festivals often pay for premiere screening rights. So we lost some films right off the bat because as soon as they pulled their dates, all that content went with them. And so we definitely had some fill in bits and pieces. We also, for example, we had originally booked a film from Australia, but between the fires and the pandemic, Australian distributors were just, it was not happening. And so we ended up ironically grabbing a film from Italy to replace that spot, which is a similar story. So there's definitely been some shifting. You will see lots of historical documentaries and more general content. We unfortunately lost 2 of our lesbian features completely, and so there's some lopsidedness there, but our shorts packages are incredibly robust and diverse, and so we're inviting people to sort of take a look at the full breadth of what we have. They're definitely stories you can't see anywhere else, and they're probably stories that you have never had the opportunity to sort of look at from this direction. So there's lots of good work here. Absolutely, it had an effect. That's the nature of the global film festival system and premieres in Hollywood, and it kind of all rolls up that way. But the work that we have is great, and the local artist content we have is great. So I have good feelings about it.
With this, the Zerb platform that you're using, is there a way for users to interact and engage with the festival while the films are actually streaming?
Yep, absolutely. So there's a discussion, a broken out discussion thread option that's available directly in the platform right below the viewing window. So you can have ongoing discussions during the film. And then when we're doing the filmmaker interviews after the film, the broadcast platform allows for the chat to be integrated into the interview questions. So your question will pop up on the screen and we can integrate you as part of the audience.
Excellent. How do you think this will impact the experience of attending the festival?
I think we're all trying to figure out what attendance impact is going to look like for the next, to be totally honest, 18 months. I think is more than realistic. Like we run events of definitely more than 100 people, and we're not getting anywhere close to those numbers. So I think there's 2 things here. I think that moving this kind of art online allows for a level of accessibility that might build audience in a way we've never been able to before, and not just global audience, but people that have problems accessing venues, right? So physical access and other things like that. We can address some of those things in this format. So I think there's potential here. But I also think that there is a feeling that is special about being in a theater full of LGBT people and experiencing stories together and laughing together and being shocked together. There is something cultural about the things we experience. And I think bringing people together in a digital format is the closest we can get, but the desire to experience that in person will come back. We've always come together. That's the queer community has always connected that way. And we've often connected that way around entertainment or a cause. And so I think we'll see both. Our intention is actually to maintain the digital platform so that we can build audiences in both places. Because at this point, it seems impractical to not take advantage of the opportunity.
And then aside from the change to digital, could you tell me a little bit about what is new with the festival this year?
Yeah, so the festival this year, so our filmmaker interviews are a new sort of integration, which is great. We have moved all of our merchandise for the festival, which has been very popular so far, onto TeePublic Online, which means that you can get Fairy Tales mugs or T-shirts, or you have more options. And we had an amazing designer work on that. So those are all bits and pieces that are a little bit new. Otherwise, by and large, our goal here is to make the festival feel familiar, to make it feel very much like you've showed up at Fairy Tales and bought your tickets and you're sitting down with everybody. And so we've done everything we can think of to make that integration work. And so we're hoping that it feels familiar to you and that it feels communal as much as we possibly can.
Great. And I know there are a number of sponsors that help support the festival every year, and there's a lot of ways that Fairy Tales encourages and promotes those festival sponsors. So in what ways are you encouraging or facilitating attendees to continue to support those sponsors during this time?
Yeah, so what we did when the pandemic went through is we actually rebuilt our entire sponsorship package and recontacted all of our sponsors because the ways that we could help and support them have changed. So we're encouraging, and we have discounts and information coming out on social media on a regular basis for local businesses. For example, 88 Brewery and Vine Arts and Infinity Ultra Lounge. They're all of these great organizations and small businesses that work in the community who are offering discounts on delivery. So we're encouraging people to get dinner and a bottle of wine from a local business and then sit down and watch a movie with us, make an event sort of out of what that looks like. And so anything we can do, we have 66 sponsors for the festival, including our presenting sponsor, RBC, and we have retained them through this because we're trying to find ways to make it work for them. So if we become an advertising platform they don't have access to, then we're extending that because we're partners in this fundamentally. The local and small business community and our corporate sponsors are an important part of the artistic work that we create, and fundamentally we're both part of the ecosystem. So it's sort of our opportunity to support them. So we're encouraging our audience to do the same.
Beyond fairy tales, the Calgary Queer Arts Society has quite a robust offering in terms of programming and events that happen throughout the year. Have you had to shift any of those to a digital platform, or are there any intentions to do that?
Yeah, so basically we have made program plans to move everything that we do in the public sphere online up until December. We have the capability to do that. We've been focused on sort of like funding initiatives to make sure that that can be balanced. But one of the things you'll see is the coming out monologues, which originally would have gone up March 20th to 23rd, will be going up August 20th to 23rd online. And so we're working through the production of filming those monologues live and being able to give you the same experience and putting them together like a virtual event. So you're going to see that. We're looking into opportunities to move the Ally Toolkit conference entirely online, which again opens us up to a different audience. Through our broadcast platform, we have the opportunity to host the conference entirely on LinkedIn, for example. So those kind of integrated software pieces are really interesting. So I think that we are prepared, and in the lead up to something like Pride, for example, there is an enormous amount of work happening behind the scenes to make Pride a reality in a way that's functional in our current sort of new normal. So we're getting creative, but there's lots of opportunity, and the local artist community here is doing incredible work. The output of artists coming from live venues online is really quite interesting. So there's no reason we can't do the same thing.
Absolutely. Has there been a particular experience that you've had online during this that is of note to you?
Oh, I mean, a few. We've had really strong response to our initial outpouring for tickets, which has been really, really great, and a lot of surprise. We maintained our original dates on purpose, and I think that was a surprise for people. We're really proud of being able to do that. But what's interesting is I've seen an enormous amount of incredibly generous online engagement because people know that the arts sector is potentially struggling and dealing with this kind of crisis. Things like donations and tipping for local artists and shows have been significant. And we're seeing numbers of 300, 400, 500 people tuning in for an online show on a Thursday, and that's significant. So it proves that the audience is present. And it also proves, to be honest, that in a time of crisis, we turn to art. And so supporting art in this moment is sort of like, I think it's sort of a combating mental health issue in a lot of ways. And people like the United Way are starting to look at the artistic community in this case as someone who is supporting the mental health of a population who needs things to look at right now. So yeah, I have been pleasantly surprised by the collective generosity in a world that is much more tense and anxious. It was a pleasant surprise.
And to finish this off, is there a particular film or series of films that you're looking forward to at this year's festival?
Oh, I mean, I'm deeply biased, but I think if you've never been to a queer film festival before, my recommendation is Sex, Sin, and 69. It covers the legal battles of LGBT people from the 1960s to present day and gives you a really good idea of what LGBT representation means. That movie would give you sort of a key into a bunch of other things that are spoken about in the festival. So that's always a good recommendation off the top. But if you're looking for a global perspective, our first weekend opens with an excellent Stonewall documentary, which chronicles sort of the global LGBT movement that started at Stonewall and the impacts of what that means. This is the 51st year since the Stonewall riot, so it's significant in terms of what that means. But outside of that, I would say if you're new to this kind of film festival format, pick a shorts package because every 5 minutes it changes and you will get to see everything from animation and rotoscoping to beautiful features and short documentaries. And it's a great way to see multiple stories at once. And we always want to encourage people to watch a story that isn't their own because that's how we learn and connect with each other.
Excellent. And how can people access tickets to the festival?
just go straight to our website, which is fairytalesfilmfest.com. We also have Calgary Queer Arts Society, which hosts the rest of our programming. They're connected, so if you're at one, you can get to the other. And then the ticket links through that site will send you directly to Zerb, and we have the option for full festival passes, 3 film passes, and single ticket sales as per usual. So depending on what you want to have access to, you've got lots of options. And we've also stretched the content. So we normally run for 10 days, but not consecutively. And this year we're running for 10 days consecutively. So there's one event every day with the exception of the Saturdays where there's 2. And so it's a bite-sized amount of content for the night for everybody, because otherwise it can be a bit of a marathon. And this gave us the opportunity to reach people in a different way.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure people would appreciate a movie marathon at this point anyway, but I can't wait to see what the festival is going to be like. I'm definitely going to be tuning in probably for just about all of it. So I can't wait for it. And we really appreciate you taking the time to join us for this. So once again, I have had James Demers of the Calgary Queer Arts Society, the executive director, and we've been speaking about the Fairy Tales Film Festival, which begins on May 14th. So hopefully everybody can tune in for that as well. Thanks a lot, James.
Awesome. Thank you very much.